Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, let me thank my friend for recognizing me for something that I consider to be, and he considers to be, and the rest of the Senate considers to be very significant. Our hearts are very heavy today because, like so many of my colleagues, I'm mourning the death of my dearest friend, Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming. I say dearest friend because he is. You know, Mike Enzi was a quiet leader in the Senate. There aren't too many quiet leaders in the Senate. And when he talked, everyone listened. And that's a rare quality in a senator. He was humble. Now, other than his humility, we had a lot in common. We were both businessmen before getting into politics, so we had that in common. We were both mayors of major cities. We had that in common. We were elected to the Senate within just about the same time, just a very short time after the second came along. So we had a lot in common. And something people might not know about Mike is that he had a heart for the downtrodden. He helped people that no one else helped. I mean, that's unusual. And the thing is, nobody knew it. Just a handful of people that were with him. One of the places where I spent a lot of time with him as a couple of the other members, John Bozeman from Arkansas, and Mike Rounds from South Dakota, and others. We were with him in some of these places where no one else really knew what he was doing. Some people might not know about Mike that he had a heart for the downtrodden, to help people that no one else would help. And I spent this morning reminiscing with friends of mine from all over the world who are calling up. Most of them are in different time zones, and they found out about Mike's death later on, and it put us in a position where we were talking to old friends that Mike and we had in common. And that happened most of the night. And the stories came from all over the world. I think over the coming days and the weeks, America is going to learn a lot more about Mike Enzi. The only reason they never knew it before was because he was humble. But you'll see that he had a hidden impact on people. He had an impact on people that resonated for long periods of time, for years. He deserved enormous credit for his lifetime of service, but accepted none. We both have a heart for Africa and traveled there often, whether to promote our work that we were doing officially, or the great partnerships, or Mike to see the implementation of PEPFAR. And I say this because if you were to single out one bill that helped more people than any other bill, likely, arguably, in the United States Senate, it would be PEPFAR. You know, Mike was the leading architect of PEPFAR when AIDS was running rage across the globe, and we all remember that. Everywhere we looked, there were the people who were contacted with AIDS, especially undeserved places like Africa and underserved. It was time for the United States to step up. President George W. Bush was committed to whatever funds it might require. Keep in mind, this arguably was the most significant, heartwarming thing that had ever happened in this Senate. And so George W. Bush he said, we'll come with any funds that might be required. The job of the Senate was to structure the way the money was to be spent, but we needed someone to lead it. And that was what the president at that time said. Well, the majority leader at that time, the Republicans were the majority, so we had the majority leader. And the Senate at that time was Dr. Bill Frist of Tennessee. We remember him, the fine job that he did. I remember him looking over the assembled members of our caucus and thinking, because he told me this afterwards, He was thinking millions of lives are at stake. Who do I entrust with this job? Millions of lives are at stake. Who do I entrust with this job? His answer was Mike Enzi, the shoe salesman from Gillette. And that bill, PEPFAR, was one of the greatest, most generous, most effective bills passed in my lifetime, and the most significant pieces of legislation ever for the country, the continent of Africa. It was Mike Enzi's skill, toughness, compassion, determination that got it done and kept it on track for a decade. Millions of lives have been saved. Millions of lives have been saved as a result of that one mission of Mike Enzi. Mike had a story he'd tell about his approach to tough problems. I've heard this probably 50 times over the years, but I still wish I could hear it and hear him tell it one more time. I'll try to do it justice. Mike was in South Africa. And by the way, this thing that happened to him down there, something that changed his whole mission of prayer. He was with Paul. Now, I can't tell you who Paul's last name was. Mike couldn't tell us who Paul's last name was, but he was a leader in South Africa. On one of his first visits, Mike asked Paul what he could do for him. Paul asked Mike to pray, and Mike said he would pray for solutions. The way Mike told it, Paul leapt up, slammed his fist on the table, and exclaimed, "No." He said, "We pray for people. Then the issues will solve themselves. Pray for the people." See, this is what changed his whole prayer behavior until his death. Mike took that to heart and truly lived it. He kept the people as his focus, knowing that by doing so, the solutions would follow. Throughout his trips, he was always there. He was always there, and when we couldn't find Mike, he would be with the kids that had problems. In Tanzania, the first call I got this morning was from Lazaro. It was from Tanzania, and is the first to express his condolences to Mike. Then the second one was the call that I got was the first call was of the Congo. It started a prayer breakfast there where he brought together political enemies, and that's still going on. So Mike had started a prayer breakfast in the Republic of Congo, in a place where it's still going on today. It was in Uganda. He went up to the northern Uganda. We were together at that time. He went with him to see the devastation of Joseph Kony and the LRA. People in this chamber know about the LRA, Lord's Resistance Army, and it was Joseph Kony. Remember, Joseph Kony would be the guy that would go and take the kids out of the villages and teach them to shoot and kill people. I'm talking about 10-year-old kids. 11-year-old kids. And if they didn't learn, they had to go back to their village and murder their parents. It was something that went on for a long period of time. I think we have here, this is Mike and both of them were here in both of these pictures. And the top one is that area in northern Uganda where all that was taking place, where Joseph Kony was going through these horrible things. And Diana was there, and Diana is with one of the nuns that was there at that time. The next picture down there, where is that one from?
Uganda.
Yeah, it was also Uganda. Yeah, that was also Uganda. And that was when those little kids were nearing the age where they would be captured and sent. And he was able to stop that. In Ethiopia, Yadabon was a place where we had a loved one that was someone that we really cared a lot for. She did so much for poor people, and Yadabon was a place where they would go up and teach people. This very charitable group did, and we used to call Mike the socks and shoes man. Now, he was a shoe salesman. That's how he started out. Everyone knows him as a shoe salesman. But he somehow got a hold of more shoes and sockers to take to places in needy areas, primarily in Africa. And so that's where we spent time with him. Rwanda, that was when the next picture, yeah, this has the president of Rwanda and his wife, Jeanette. And here's Jeanette down here with his wife, and it was something that we all loved. In fact, we had the wives there of 4 members of the Senate who were with us at that time. And this is one that more the things that we just did together. And Kenya, a very similar thing happened. This is another thing that's taking place today. In Kenya, we went to the National Prayer Breakfast. That was 6 or 7 years ago. And we were there, and we played a part in that National Prayer Breakfast. But at the time, there had been a guy named Kenyatta who was president of Kenya, and Odinga. Odinga in Kenyatta were bitter enemies, and they talked about killing each other. They actually tried several times, but Mike made a statement there with 4,000 witnesses in Kenya and told the story about love and how these people had loved these 2 members when they were in Parliament together many years ago, that they loved each other and invited them to come up and to embrace, and they did that. And that was when between two groups of people headed up by a Kenyatta and Odinga, and they became, right at that point, friends for life. And today, they are still friends. Kenyatta is retiring and Odinga most likely will be elected to be his successor. Now, that was years ago, and that happened. In Western Sahara, right now we're fighting this thing that we are very much on this side of Western Sahara in a fight. And the picture you're looking at, I think, is a picture of President Ghali. President Ghali, yeah. And then wherever we went, we'd also see, Mike would disappear. These are the only 2 that he could find in that area that were from his state, but nonetheless, there he is with the leader, the president of that country. John Kufuor, the same thing happened. John Kufuor is kind of funny because if you go to Ghana, not to be confused with Uganda, but in Ghana, it's funny because there are more people there, more Jesus people there than anyone else. And so he named a stand to help some people there. He called it Juices for Jesus. That was Mike Enzi. Malawi, he started a prayer group in Malawi, the young parliamentarians on this early visit. It was Lazarus was one of the original members and is now president of Malawi. Now, we're getting a little bit old now, but this happened a long time ago. He was close with him, and that's another call that we got early this morning. There are probably a half dozen other countries in Africa we visited together, and a dozen or so outside of the continent. And no matter how difficult the trip was, whether he was getting left in Kosovo, which actually happened, he was with a bunch of kids in Kosovo, and we miscounted our passengers and left them in Kosovo and had to go back and get them. But no matter how difficult the trip was, by the Codel, leading the new term called getting Enzi'd. So that's a new term that we use here in the United States Senate. If you are late someplace and you get left alone, you are getting Enzi'd. Or in Uganda, when the ceiling in his hotel room fell on him when he was sleeping, he was always there, no matter how tough things were. It was more than the policy for Mike. He also loved people. I mean, all people. We couldn't go anywhere without him packing hundreds of soccer balls and shoes to give away to kids. Now, I don't know how it happened, soccer balls and shoes. I don't know how many thousands of soccer balls and shoes that he had distributed to these kids, but one thing they all had in common, they were all barefooted when they started. And one of the things that we attributed to him, because it was one of his favorite Proverbs, Proverb 31, 8 and 9. This actually is not by Solomon. This is by someone a lot of people haven't heard. It was King Lemuel, speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And that was the impact that Mike had on everyone. He and Diana also regularly hosted parties for Capitol staff. Now, this is kind of interesting because we're used to parties around here. Lots of parties go. Every night there are parties and all that. But not Mike's parties. Mike's parties were for the people. They were for the staff. They were for the people who were you didn't see every day. You'd see them every day, but you would never give appreciation to them. The cleaning staff, food service, electricians, and others. These are the people that he and Mike and his wife would do together and would hold these parties for him. And Diana enjoyed it just as much as Mike did. He loved those parties. He also loved talking about how during one of them, he was talking to an electrician in the Capitol, some guy who was working as an electrician in the Capitol, who kept the place going every day. We understand that. And then the man turned to him after they had talked for a long period of time. Mike had asked him what an electrician does around the Capitol and all that. And when he got all through, he looked at Mike and he said, "Well, Mike, what do you do?" So that was Mike. He never wanted attention from everyone. And he always laughed about that story. That was good. Kay and I were talking today about how much of a team Mike and Diana were and how well they complemented each other. She was saying how much fun they were to be with because they truly enjoyed everything that they did. As Kay put it, and as my wife, she said they both looked for ways to help people. While Mike was steadfast and intentional, Diana was a whirlwind of energy that brought the vision to life. You know, Kay and Mike were also both members of the Zipper Club. And I bet you guys don't know what the Zipper Club was because they both had their heart valves replaced and about the same time. And my wife used a cow valve and Mike used a mechanical valve. And his wife would say that Diana would always tell Kay that she could hear Mike's valve rattling at night. So Kay always told him that he should have it done with a cow valve. You know, these are very important subjects we're talking about here, but there are things that make the kind of memories that is really who he is and who he was. Mike never missed our weekly Senate prayer breakfast where he was a leader for many years. He even had a card with all 100 senators. That's all the senators who are here in this room right now. That's enough, all 100 senators. And he divided the 100 senators up in 5 groups. And so he would pray for 5 senators, 20 senators each day. And one time when he was leading the prayer breakfast, he invited King Abdullah from Jordan to join us. In fact, King Abdullah was here last week, and I shared this story with him because he was always a little bit nervous about what he was going to say. The Lord gave him a verse, and it was an excellent example of prayer uniting those different faiths. Different faiths. We're talking about the Muslims and Mike Enzi. And so King Abdullah paid homage to him, saying he should have been there again. Even after he retired from the Senate, he joined us every week and virtually for prayer, discussion, and fellowship. Tomorrow's breakfast will not be the same because he retired from the Senate just a few months ago, but he attended every one of our prayer breakfasts virtually. So as Mike Rounds said, I got to know Mike on a deeper level each week. But more than anything else, bigger than any other accomplishment, was Mike's love for his family. Mike was utterly devoted to his family of more than 50 years. Diana, their 3 children, Amy, Emily, and Brad, and their grandchildren. You come to think of it, Mike's 4 favorite topics were Jesus, the family, and fishing. Now, you might think that trout fishing wouldn't be anyone's favorite thing to do if they're a member of the Senate, but he would travel around. There's not a lot of people, but a lot of land in Wyoming. And one of the problems he would have, his staff would tell me that they'd line up something he's supposed to be doing in another part of the state, but he'd go across a creek someplace, and he'd get out, and if he was catching fish, he'd completely forget about where he was going to go. And staffs don't enjoy that type of thing, but nonetheless, that's what he did. He knew how to fly fish. And in fact, one of the things that we were anticipating for Mike and Diana was that Kay and I spent a lot of time. People don't realize in the state of Oklahoma, we have more miles of freshwater shoreline than any of the 50 states. Do you guys believe that? Yeah, it's true. And nonetheless, he loved to fish. So one of the things they were going to do when they retired, Mike and Diana, they were planning to travel the Route 66 and go all the way across. Well, the cabin that we have in a lake in Oklahoma actually is right on Route 66, so they're planning to come and join us. Kay and I join the entire Enzi family today in their grief and in celebration, in celebrating the remarkable life of a true servant leader, Mike Enzi. And all we can say is, Mike, we'll see you soon. I yield the floor.